Doing a picture.
Hope you got the picture. We're live now. Welcome in, everyone. It is March. What's the date today? We're March
4th. 3424.
Yes, March 4th into the future. All right. And Mandy, how are we doing now? Spring is getting closer. How are we feeling? How are we doing?
I'm feeling awesome. My husband and I, Scoot and I, went appliance shopping this weekend, and there's nothing more solidifying in a romance than going appliance shopping. I'll tell you that. How much you have in common, how much you don't have in common, and all surrounds around a gas range. So that was fun. That was what we did. We really adulted real hard this weekend. What about you? What'd you do, Monty?
Okay. This weekend, I had to take some time and I had to finish up some edits for my second book. Yes. I was able to finish all the edits last night at like 11:30 p.m. So I'm going to turn it in, and now we're off to layouts and all that. So my question is, I had an idea that I need to pick 2 pictures per chapter. Each chapter is about a Black Army group. So 2 pictures per chapter. And I was going to do a stream where I work with the people in the stream to help me pick the pictures. What do you think?
I love that. Like building in public kind of thing, asking for advice. I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
But don't do all of it at once. Maybe do 3 one week and 3 another week. And if you can, I don't know if you can do that from a timing perspective, if you've got to get information back to your illustrator or editors, but I like a drip. I like a good drip when it comes to these book launches and getting advice from the audience who are so excited about this book that's about to come out.
Right. Okay. Good idea there. Okay. Awesome. So that was my idea. I know we had to follow up on that. That's what I did. And as a treat for myself today, I'm going to go get some ice cream after dinner, sit there and just enjoy it and eat. That's what I'm going to do.
You should do that. Okay, Amani, I think, both of us, when we went through the book process, you finish one piece, then you go to the other, and we always forget. And this happens in business and life too. We always forget to celebrate the mini wins. So you're celebrating your mini win of sending in all your edits with ice cream tonight, which is so fun. Yes. What is next? So the pictures are next, but what's next in the book process?
Probably the next is deciding on the definite title. That's probably the next biggest thing is the title. Yeah, that's probably it. So.
Well, you got to ask advice for that. Get feedback for that too.
That's kind of 3 working ones, but maybe. So that'll be the next big thing is the title.
Do a LinkedIn poll, like a voting poll with your titles. That was one of my favorite things about my book. I got the subtitle from people, social media audience. I wasn't sure what the subtitle should be, and people voted, and that was super fun.
All right, I'll do that. Now, speaking of books and speaking of titles.
And an awesome book cover too, by the way.
Cover, and look at this title here. Oh my goodness. Like F the fairy tale. So we have with us, I'm gonna tell a story. Damona Hoffman's with us. We're gonna put her in on screen for you because I want to tell a story. See, there's Damona right there. She shows, so just wave to the people. That's Damona right there. Hi. I'm gonna tell a story.
Good
First round
wave.
of applause. Yes. So I first met Damona walking in the hallway at Podcast Movement in 2018 in Philadelphia. Came up there solo, going to all the sessions, and I met Damona. I was like, "Hey, I saw you're from LA. I'm from LA. We talked or whatever." She said, "Oh, I'm having a breakout session. Come over." I came over to the breakout. It was a fun one. It was cool, and then we just kept in touch ever since. Damona was my guest co-host for my first Twitch dating show, which was extremely successful and
So
extremely
fun.
hilarious. It was
It
great.
was so
She
good.
came back a few times for us there. She's been on my other podcast, the Amount Experience podcast, and we also hung together and did some work at a previous, or I guess after Philly, other podcast movements too. So, with all that, we welcome Damona Hoffman to Adventures in Business. How are we doing today?
We are doing so good. Wow, you have amazing memory. It was as you were talking, all the moments, all the memories are coming back to me, and I'm like, yeah. When you
Yes.
find people that you like collaborating with, it's just an awesome experience. So thank you for
Aw.
having me here and collaborating again.
Yes, we love it. I read the entire book. I have lots of questions, but I want to ask you a question about the book since I was just sharing some of my process. How long did it take for you to write the book from beginning to end? Because I know you're about 2/12 through the whole process of like broadcasting and sharing everything. How long did it take you?
Forever.
That's what I was asking. Yes.
I actually came up with the concept in fall of 2020. Took
Okay.
me a little while to get the book proposal together, to find an agent to shop it. Then my agent wanted to make the pitch deck, the proposal fancy. So it took another couple months for that to happen. Then we took it out to market. Then it went to auction. Then we finally settled on a house to sell it to in fall of 2021. So that's now a year.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then it took a year for the first draft. Then I had an editor change. Then I had to
Mm.
do some revisions. Then it took another 6 months. And then it took almost a year from that. So yeah, about 3 years and 3 to 3.5 years in total.
Wow.
Well, I wanna
Not
ask,
that long.
the cover is so strong.
Thank
So
you.
was this the first iteration, or is this like what number are we in this where you landed on the final picture? Because it's a great cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was really lucky. I heard a lot of horror stories about publishers and covers. This
Mhm.
was technically our 3rd iteration, but I would say the first version was really, really close to this. The
Mhm.
first version was, basically this. The typesetting was slightly different, but it was a pink cover with a blue F,
Mm.
and it really popped, and I loved it, and I love pink. Pink is my Dates and Mates podcast color for the last 11 years. I love it. I love that Amani is wearing pink. I have a pink light behind me. I'm kind of into pink, y'all. But I said, I don't think one man is gonna buy this book if it has a
Oh,
pink cover. So I said, maybe we invert it and it'll have the same effect. And I think it does. I think the pink F has that effect. And I know at least one man bought it.
At
yes.
lea Money, at least one man.
Yes, at least one
Okay,
man.
well, I know we're supposed to ask Damona a question, but since you just finished reading the book, Amani, I wanna ask you, what's a takeaway that you got from the book?
Okay, got my list here. Takeaway: green flags versus the red flags concept, the 3-date rule, the 4 pillars, particularly the trust pillar, which we're going to talk about. We're going to do that. Um, how relationships can cause you to experience physical changes in your body. That was an important
Mm.
section. I paid attention to that one. Um, there's no such thing as a soulmate. That's another one that I read and I love.
You're supposed to say spoiler alert.
I'm sorry. My bad. My bad. Um, so those are some takeaways. So that could be a good
Wow.
segue. Um, out of the four pillars, can I share the four pillars or should I?
Yeah, no, you can share the 4 pillars. You
Okay.
can share any of it.
Out of the four pillars you discussed, which are goals, values, communication, and trust, in your opinion, which one do you feel is taken for granted or underrated?
Hmm. Underrated, certainly the trust, because we're in such a hurry to get to it that a lot of folks don't wanna do the foundational work to build it, and they have a hope or an expectation that it will just be there,
Yeah.
but it has to be built. That's my
Yeah,
answer. Final
that's
answer.
final answer. And
Is
there's a
that your final answer?
That is
Yeah.
my
yeah,
final answer.
this one kind of resonated with me the most. There's a quote that you put. It says, "Trust means being able to actually hear your partner without pushing for your desired outcome." I thought that was a really, really strong quote, so I appreciate that one. In terms of once trust is lost, is it possible to regain it? If so, what are some best practices?
You're going, right to the
I mean,
coup de
we're
grace.
here.
He's
We're
getting in
here.
it. He's getting in it.
Yes, yes. Um, but and I think this also does relate to folks in business too, because a lot of what I talk about in building relationships is not all that different from building relationships professionally too. So I'm probably not saying anything that your audience doesn't already know, but trust can be rebuilt if it's broken, but it takes the magic elements of time and consistency. And both of those are very difficult for a lot of people and are also completely situational. But to rebuild trust, you need to see, to build trust in the first place, you need to see how somebody's actions match up with their words over time. And that's where the consistency and the time both come in. But once it's broken, it's almost like you start back, not even at the starting line. You've got to start thr 3 paces behind that and
Mhm.
then take a running head start to catch up.
Yes, agreed. Interesting. Okay, man, Mandy, I know you have questions from yourself as well as some audience members who couldn't be in attendance. I'm going to go back and forth between yours, whatever Damona says. I have a list of questions here. Uh,
Money. We're gonna frog her. We're gonna frog her a little bit. I'm not gonna go to the Wayback Machine yet, Damona, but I do have a Wayback Machine question. But this question, since we're talking about business, I want to talk about the distributed workforce right now, aka remote working. And I remember when I was, moved from Ohio to San Diego, I was 24 years old, and that was how I met people. I worked, and after work we'd go for happy hours, and sometimes I'd date some people I worked with. Sometimes I did it. Sometimes I'd meet people through people. That was the way, that was how my social life began. And with this distributed workforce and this remote work environment, I noticed my niece, for example, is 24 years old and she's in her room working all the time. So she relies on the dating apps. And we'll talk about the business of the dating apps in a little bit. But I'm just curious for you, what advice do you have for the people that are in the distributed workforce world that aren't interacting with physical people all the time and they may or may not want to use the dating app? Like, what is that gap they can bridge to actually get out there and meet people?
We are in a really interesting time, Mandy, as we are transitioning. We're still transitioning from the old normal to through the new normal to the new normal
Mhm.
of really reintegrating, and I think we will never go back to what we had before. And it's funny because I started out in corporate media, and I remember being like, how do people go to the bank? Because I was working like 9 to
Yeah,
6, 9 to 7
yeah.
every day, Monday through Friday, and some evenings, and just, trying to establish myself. And
Mhm,
like you said, my whole social circle was really wrapped up in my work.
mhm,
Um, and that nobody wants to return to that sort of rat race anymore.
mhm,
So we are seeing a major shift in our lifestyle. and we haven't really settled on what it's going to ultimately look like in the future,
Mhm.
because we do have that, like, the Gen Z workers who never had what you described and
Mhm.
what I just described. That was not the normal for them. And so for them, we're seeing that Gen Z workers are living with friends, and it's their living space that's more of their social component,
Mhm.
and then they go online to work, but the workspace is really just that. It is just work. It's not a place where you're building relationships. And so that's the interesting transition that, as a dating and relationship coach, I'm really tracking, is how does that impact both our interpersonal and romantic relationships, because we're not that generation is not really learning those skills and to build relationships in that way. And I'm also interested in seeing how it impacts their career trajectory
Mhm.
when you don't, like, I used to just be able to walk down the hall and talk to somebody in a different division and be like, What do you do? What does your day-to-day look like?"
Yeah.
Or pop into my boss's office and get a little bit of FaceTime with them. Not the digital kind, the actual FaceTime, right?
Before FaceTime was FaceTime. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And that is not happening. All of the time is scheduled. And that's something that I'm really interested in examining more, how our interactions change when that unscheduled happenstance meeting and connecting is not happening anymore.
It's funny that you say that because we were just at a State of the Industry event where David Blainsfield, who's the publisher of North Star Media for the meetings and conference industry, he talked about as a company how they made a bold decision to actually reopen an office in LA, and he was getting a lot of flack for it. But his position, and I think it's really in line with what you're saying, and I'm curious about this element of it too, is yes, like being able to walk down to your boss's office, all of that stuff is important. Those relationships are important. But the other thing that's important for the people on the bench is to hear mid-level or senior people have a conversation, hear how they're establishing or developing relationships too. So what do you think about, and I guess we're off track a little bit, but I'm curious about your opinion just about relationship development. Like what do you think about the corporations right now that are really struggling about finding their footing between, do we open an office? Do we not open our office? What are the statistics or the numbers behind like developing deeper relationships at work for career and growth trajectory?
I do think that in-person interaction is really important. Um, if I knew what the what the structure should look like, I'd probably be making a lot more money, but
Wouldn't we all? Wouldn't we all? Yeah.
because I do think that is something a lot of the workers from the prior normal miss, but people want to retain the flexibility.
Yeah.
So we kinda wanna have our cake and eat it too, and I don't yet know what the answer is, but I think you've gotta build it, right? There's
Mhm.
something in between being fully distributed online and mandating that workers return to the workforce, because nobody wants a mandate. Nobody
Right.
wants to feel forced to be there.
Mhm.
It's something that I think corporations are going to have to incentivize their workers to want to return to the workplace, and I'm not exactly sure how to do that because everybody has different needs and different restrictions.
Mhm.
And one thing that was really interesting during the pandemic, um, and I know Amani may have a few things to say about this. It was very
Mhm.
interesting um, for daters I was working with, who suddenly their dating pool went from people in their immediate circle to anyone anywhere in the world. And
Mm.
also because they were able to work remote, they could they could, you know, fantasize about a relationship with somebody in another location and actually pursue it or maintain a relationship long distance, until you got to that next step. And that had never happened before in history. We've
Hmm.
never had that ability to really maintain a long distance relationship. Like, okay, there were people like people that sent for their loved ones on the Titanic, or whatever.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yes. And they
I'll
got
say
there 2 years
The QE
later.
too,
Yeah.
not the Titanic.
Yeah,
That would
not
be a
the
bad.
Titanic. They
But,
never got there.
like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
would send and you would send a letter and it would take 3 months, or, like, you'd write to your person on the battle, like, okay, it's very romantic, but that wasn't really how the majority of relationships were formed. And when I was writing F the Fairy Tale, I really wanted to look at not just where we were right now, but how did we get here?
Mhm.
What were the foundational elements and what were the societal shifts that have impacted the way that we connect today? And I found that most people in prior generations met and married somebody right in their immediate social circle. So as
Mhm.
you said, at work, through their church, through their in their neighborhood. Most people when in the 1920s, most people were marrying folks that lived within a few blocks.
Yes.
There's some census data that showed that I cited in the in the book, that people were marrying in Philadelphia within a 5-block radius of their house. When you think about that, compared to the way that we live our lives now,
Mhm.
it it's expansive, but it also does require us to really rewire our brains and the way that we think about connection. So rather than being nostalgic for like, wouldn't that have been nice? It's so easy. It's like, yeah, it's easier, but you didn't have as much choice. And now people are looking for partners that fulfill, a bazillion needs, and they're looking for a job, a career that is more than just going to the factory and punching a clock. We are demanding more for our lives, and that demands more of us in turn.
Mm.
Mm. I love that you brought up those love letters because the old days love letter. I actually have this book right here, this Love Letters of Great Men. Okay.
Um,
And my husband got this for me many years ago. I don't know if you remember on Sex and the City, the movie, when Carrie was reading this exact book and she was crying. And these are love letters from like Winston Churchill, Mark Twain, F. Scott Fitzgerald. And I read this, but every time I read this, I'm like, these men are writing letters to their mates who are thousands and thousands of miles away. I mean, this one's from like 1820 and this one's from 1919. They're thousands of miles away and they may not get the letter for months and months and months, and the longing they had in these words and the desire and the passion. And every time I read this and I think about now how everything is like so instant or so
yeah.
swipe, right? And so I wanted to ask you, how do we cultivate, like, how do we go from like these love letters from great men, and it should say and women or of all of us, but like, how do we cultivate this loyalty, desire, burning, like this intensity in modern day relationships? Like, is there a way or is that dead? Like, is there a way to do that?
I don't think that's the question, Mandy. I think the
Ooh.
question is, how do we adapt to where we are right now and modify our expectations based on the
Oh.
tools and technology and customs for communicating today?
Ooh, that's better. Wait, let's say that again. How do we adapt? How do we adapt to the technology and the customs for today? And it's
Yeah.
basically managing our own love expectations. Would you say that?
Completely, and that's why
Yeah.
I wrote F the Fairy Tale. People think that when
Yeah.
I say F the Fairy Tale, I mean F love, like, forget about it, you can't have it, you can't have lasting love, F it. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying, let's let go of the love letters, dare I say, Mandy? Let's let go of the fantasy
Yeah.
that once was, and
Mhm.
let's look at where we are right now. And then how do I, one, figure out what my needs are? Because that's a big challenge in my practice. People come to me and want connection and want, like, all the things that you said, loyalty and passion and longing and support. We all need that and we all crave that. And we have no idea how to get that met because we are expecting it to look like it did
Mhm.
in the past, in the fairy tales, in the rom-coms, in all of the things that are in our head.
Yes.
Expectations from family,
Mhm.
societal norms. There's just so much wrapped in. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying forget that. Write your own love story.
Ooh, I like that. I
I
like
love that.
that.
Yes. Now, speaking of expectations and fairy tales, why is the 3-date rule so important?
um, you want my honest answer?
No, your dishonest answer.
No lies. No
I'm not
lies
sure that
there,
the
Damona.
3-date rule is that important anymore. This is the other thing. This is the other thing with the work that I do. It's so rapidly changing
Mhm.
that it's been interesting. I've been coaching now for over 17 years. I um I wrote an ebook that came out 11 years ago. And there are a lot of remnants in that are still relevant. However, I was like, I need to write something that's really timely. And that's going to mean that even by the time the book comes out, I may have changed my perspective on some of the stuff.
Mhm.
So, to answer your question, I'm not sure if the 3-date rule is important, but what I will tell you is important is slow love. I don't really like rules, which I say in the book. I say tools over rules.
Mm.
My clients love rules and keep asking me for them. So I give these guidelines like the 3-date rule, like the 1 week, you have 1 week from the time you match online to get out into the real world. Like set a drink maximum. For me, it was 1 because I'm a little thing and can and a cheap date and I cannot hold my liquor.
Twofer.
Uh,
Mhm.
right? But I'm more interested in people developing rules for themselves based on their own patterns and their own values. But I like the 3-date rule because it's when I have seen most of my clients hit a turning point. So I'll explain the 3-date rule for, anyone that's like, "What are you even talking about, Damona? You're already contradicting yourself and you just started. I don't know what you're talking about." So I say that in the first a at the end of the first date, all you need to know by the end of the date is that you're curious enough about that person to spend one more date slash hour, hour and a half with them. We keep those first few dates very short and sweet. That is a hot tip from the book. Then at the end of the second date, all you need to know is that you're curious enough about that person to go on the third date. If by the third date, you're not starting to have amorous feelings, think of them as more than a friend, then usually that is not your person. Now, just recently on Dates and Mates just got a comment from someone that said that they heard my 3-date rule, they stuck with that, and at the end of the third date, they still weren't totally clear. So they gave them a fourth date. At the end of the fourth date, they were still a little bit curious, but they still weren't totally clear. They gave them a fifth date. And for them, the passion kicked in on date 5. They
Mm,
were, like, grateful that they had somewhat of a framework for slow love to keep going with it because the old them may have discarded someone at date 1, and that's what I see a lot of. People are like, "I need the spark right now. I need to know, are they gonna be my future? I need to know, are we going to have passionate sex right away? And if not, then thank you, next, on to the next swipe." So I need to slow that process down for people, and the 3-date rule is how I do that for my clients and listeners.
okay. So my follow-up is also a fun fact that Damona came all the way down from Hollywood to Fullerton, talked to my class in 2019, one of my first semester there.
Aw, it's
It was
awesome.
on TV and her experience as a TV exec, and spent the entire day, both classes, talking to my students. So I'm forever grateful for that. So I have to
That was
mention
a
that.
great time. Thank
Yeah.
you, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Now, how do you work with the younger generation, or maybe some people a little older, on developing patience when it comes to dating, which you were just speaking about?
Practice, first of all.
Mhm.
And this is sort of a global recommendation for all of these dating and relationship skills. We have been sold a bill of goods. We've been told you should just know how to build relationships. And I speak of friendships and romantic relationships. We should
Yeah.
just know. We should know how to attract someone. We should just know how to get someone to be interested in us. We should know how to communicate clearly. We should know how to build trust with somebody. We should just know. And I've been doing this a long time. And I will tell you that most folks don't know.
Mhm.
And I can also tell you that most folks can get better at any of those skills by practicing them.
Mhm.
And it does require you to sit in the unknown, to sit in discomfort sometimes, to go push beyond your comfort zone and to see what's on the other side of that. And I know that's uncomfortable for a
Yeah.
lot of people, but the more that you practice and build those skills, even if it's just the skill of delaying gratification, staying present in the moment with somebody. We get there's so much anxiety in dating today, and my feeling is that most of it comes from either ruminating on the past or projecting to the future.
Mm.
We're not present. We're not right
Mm.
in the moment with the person sitting across from us. We're on our phones. We're thinking about our ex. We're thinking about if this person could fit in with our friend circle, if we could introduce them to our mom. And we're missing all the stuff because it's all happening right here in the present moment.
Mm. How do we stop ruminating about the past?
Asking for a friend, Amani.
Mandy knows me well.
You always know when Amani is a specific question
Also,
for
shout
him.
out to Heather Cox in the chat who's been commenting. She says she met her husband on Bumble. Okay, back to the question. So yes,
Okay,
for a
we're
friend.
gonna get to dating apps because that's my favorite topic.
Mhm.
Um, therapy.
Yes, amen.
I'm a big fan of therapy, and I wanna clarify because a lot of people are like, "So what do you do, Damona, as a dating and relationship coach? So are you're like a therapist?" No, I specifically strategize with people on how to find and move into lasting relationships. That is really my lane. So my work dovetails beautifully with the work of a therapist. I'm not going to go into your relationship past and patterns and your family history and all that. I'm going to assume that when you come to me ready to date differently, you're going to have your stuff sorted and you're going to be ready to implement a plan to move you towards that relationship. And if you haven't sorted it, nothing will bring it out like the process of dating, right? And then you're like, "Oh, I didn't know that that was in there. Hello." And then that's when a therapist can also be helpful working concurrently with the work that I do. So, that is one thing. And then the other thing is replacing the old memories with good memories
Mm,
from,
Mm.
new memories.
yeah.
So, and I think, we've all been through disappointment and heartbreak, and it's really acute when it first happens, and we feel it a lot, and we think about it a lot, and it plays and it plays and it plays in our mind. And the further we get from it, it's not that it ever really fully goes away, but it hurts a little bit less. It's a little less acute. It's just like any kind of wound, right? And sometimes wounds become chronic pain, right?
Right.
Scar,
And
yeah, scar.
they
Yeah.
it could be just a scar, a reminder. It could be chronic pain. Or you could heal it completely, and then it's just becomes a story, a part of your story, a thing that happened to you. But I don't think it's necessarily bad to have a history or to have a past. The question is, how is it impacting you in the present?
Mm,
Ooh.
very good. I will continue. I have another question, but I'll continue to Mandy and we'll go back and forth. But great answer. Thank you.
I like how you just sort of created a quote, like scars can become good stories or scars can I wanna noodle on that a little bit because I think you just brought something cool up. It doesn't have to stay a scar. It doesn't have to stay bad. It can merge into something good, or can
Yeah.
merge into something better.
I should take a note on that. I'm like, that's not in the book.
Okay.
That just happened off the cuff, but I'm like,
It did.
that's good. That's good.
Put that in
It's
the
good. Yeah,
yeah.
you did it. Yeah, I like that.
I'm
Yeah.
getting it down.
Yeah.
Write it down. Note to self. Yeah, another nugget of Damona genius.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about dating apps because you just mentioned it, and if the internet's lying to me with numbers, let me know. But I recently read this is dating apps are of almost a $5 billion business. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for something that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, a lot of people didn't do, and now 300 million people worldwide are using dating apps. I think that's awesome, right? So I think I'm curious with you. I used dating apps when I started, I loved dating, but then I ended up meeting my husband the old fashioned way at a bar, right? But if I were dating now, I 100% would use an app. To me, it feels like very efficient. So for
Mhm.
people out there that aren't using apps, or what do you say to them, the people that aren't using apps and the people that are using apps? I have some questions about profile pictures and things like that.
Well, the numbers aren't wrong. I don't have the exact receipts, but dating apps have seen tremendous growth over the last 10 years. And it is it is one of the top 3 ways that people meet.
Mhm.
So, if those things are true and your person could connect with you on a dating app, I don't know why you would eliminate any method of meeting somebody because it's new, it's unfamiliar. If that may be the best chance at you connecting with the person who aligns with you on the pillars that Amani just mentioned, like shared goals, shared values, communication, compatible communication styles, and that you could build trust with. And it's funny to me that people will just swear off dating apps for whatever reason. I know I've heard all of them, so you can put them in the chat, but I've definitely heard them before. When we would never say that about a real world venue. You wouldn't be like, "I'm never going to." I had a bad experience at a bar. I met a person that was not who they said they were at a bar, which, by the way, has happened to me.
Oh, yeah, to all of
By the
us,
way,
a million of times.
I was
Yeah,
like, my
yeah.
next book is gonna be called "I Could Have Been Dead" about all of my, like, terrible dating decisions that aren't even in this book. But, okay, so
I have
this is,
some
like, offline
submissions.
dating
Yeah.
experiences, right? Okay, I met somebody at a bar, didn't hit it off with them. You know what? I'm just not ever gonna go to a bar again. I just don't like bars. I'm just not gonna do it. Or, I met somebody through a friend and we dated for a few months, which is often what I'll hear about why people don't want to use dating apps. It worked for a few months, but then we broke up. So I'm just not going to go when a friend invites me to a dinner party again. Because I only dated somebody for 3 months, so it didn't really work. Dinner parties don't work. It sounds ridiculous, right? When I say it that
Mhm.
like that, but that's what I'll hear about dating apps. I tried it. I did say date someone for 3 months, but it didn't work. No, it did work. That just wasn't your long-term person, but it did work. And so we have to look at your dating venues, your dating portfolio with all of the cards on the table. And as you said a moment ago, Mandy, I believe that dating apps are the most efficient and powerful tool in your dating toolbox. They
Mhm.
can be used to practice your dating skills. I found that and I met my husband online, I'm embarrassed to say how many years ago, but 20. And
It's
I know
wonderful. It's
it is
wonderful.
wonderful, but I
Yes.
mean, how could I possibly have been 20 years? I mean,
You were
I was
early. You're early
I was
dater.
we last. Um, but I have just seen time and time again that dating apps, online dating is it's so efficient and it is such a good tool to practice dating skills. And I found that when I was dating online and dating offline, because I never was like, I'm only dating online. I was meeting more people out in the real world because I was practicing these skills that we were talking about. I was getting better at flirting. I was getting better at listening. I was approaching people. I was putting less emphasis on each individual interaction so it could unfold naturally. And so when you look at the benefits, I think the benefits far outweigh the downsides of online dating. But there are guidelines, there are best practices that a lot of people don't know. So when you say that dating apps have become more popular and they've become a what did you say, $5 billion?
$5
Mhm.
billion. Yeah.
Okay, if you got the figures, we'll go with it. If
Three.
they've become
Yeah.
that big of a business, obviously they're they have value. They're working for some people, and it's it's all in learning to use the tool effectively.
Mhm.
But there's so many people that have flooded the dating apps since Tinder, because I was when I was online dating, it was like a desktop. It was like a dial-up scan.
Not that
You're
long ago.
laughing.
Not that long
Amani,
I
you're
ago.
was
laughing.
That's how it was when I was online dating. It was like
No
eHarmony. No,
dial-up, no
it
AOL.
it
Stop it.
was. Damona, I'm
Okay,
with
it was
you.
post AOL.
Thank
I'm
you.
However,
I'm with you,
AOL at
Damona.
Match was one of the first.
Mhm.
There's JDate.
Yeah.
JDate,
Mhm.
my
Mhm.
people. That was also the first dating site that I wrote for. I wrote a column for
Mm.
them. And then there was AOL at Match, and then there was Match and Matchmaker, and so many of the early sites that it was a whole dial up. I had to scan my photo. There was a high barrier for entry at that point. And I appreciate that Tinder made it so easy for people to just get online and start swiping. But then, low barrier for entry, various levels of intent, dissonance in the communication and conversation because different outcomes started to occur.
Mhm.
Well, I wanna know profile-wise, this is a question from a gal pal in Ohio, is what are 3 things people can do to make their profile either more like them or more compelling or just stand out?
Well, in this little book that I wrote called F the Fairy Tale, I do give my 3 C's:
Mm.
color, context, character. So there's 3. Color, strategic to stand out. Amani is wearing a beautiful pink, uh, Animaniacs.
Amaniacs, yeah.
Oh, I was like, Animaniacs. I love it. I was like, "What are you?" Okay, I can't read. Um, he's doing 2 things right, actually. He's wearing color, and he's got a conversation piece clothing item on, which starts like then people ask, "Wait, what does that say?" "Amaniacs." "Oh, that's me." And then that can begin another connection. But
Mhm.
on the dating profile, we want to be strategic and use color to stand out. This is kind of a marketing thing, right?
Mhm.
Same as anything else online. And I just read something about color theory and how certain musical artists have solidified a color. I'm not speaking your language, Amani, of
Mhm.
like, okay, green is Billie Eilish and pink is Nicki Minaj, and you know, who's purple? Purple is, Olivia Rodrigo, that
Okay.
you
Yeah.
associate a certain color because we have an emotional reaction, right, to that color. So, this is strategic in your dating profile. The next thing is context. This is telling your story through your photos. And then the last one is character. That's showing your personality through your pictures, and that's the one most people forget because people are like, "I want it to look glossy and filtered and pretty like Instagram." It's not Instagram. It's your dating
Mhm.
profile. So we want all that authenticity that was infused within your question. We want the real you. We just want a sort of curated version of you, as if like this is the museum of your life story. You're not going to put out all the pieces. You're going
Mhm.
to tell a story through the composition of your entire dating profile.
Love
Well,
that. The 3 C's. Read it in the book. I love that.
yes. Yes. Now, we are to the point in the show where we flip the script
Oh,
and we
that
allow
happened
you
fast.
to, but we have some extra time afterwards. Don't worry,
Okay.
because we have questions to answer. Where we allow you to ask both myself and Mandy any question. Nothing is offline. Who would you like to ask a question to first?
Hmm. Mandy.
Yes.
As someone who has authored a book before, what what surprises did you have along the way that you weren't prepared for, but would tell an author to be mindful of so that they could have the most fruitful experience of publishing a book?
Oh, that's a good question, and I like that you say surprises instead of, like, "Oh, shit" moments, because there's a lot of those too, but I think the number one thing that just came to mind when you said that is that when you write a book, there's so much hustle and bustle and actually the editing and picking the cover and the promotion and the book tour and the launches and the TV shows and all that stuff, right? There's a harried moment for that. But what we don't think about is life beyond that, and that your book has and it will take on a life of its own. Like there are so many authors that will tell you like the first year was crazy and then year 7 or 8 I had Purdue University order 600 books and then make my book their brand standard for a curriculum for a class. So I think whether it's, whether you are, and that didn't happen to me, that happened to somebody I know, but I think like, but I've been experiencing it. My book came out October 2021. And I think I had more book sales this year so far than I had the second whole half of 2023. I think your book will take on a life of its own. You have no control over it. That's okay. We have a lot of control over the marketing process in the beginning, but then it starts getting into different people's hands and then people start recommending it and it doesn't just end after that first year and a half. Just know that it will take on a life of its own.
I love that. That
Yeah.
was really helpful to hear.
And it was a surprise. It was a surprise. That was a big surprise. So I am glad you said surprise because that triggered that memory for me.
Yeah, it's funny. As you were talking, I was remembering hearing Don Miguel Ruiz talking about the Four Agreements. And I think it was something like over 10 years from the time he wrote it to the
Yeah.
time I think Oprah put it on
Mhm.
a list or had
Yeah.
it on the show or something like that. And then it literally went from like nothing to one of
Yeah.
the biggest books, I
Mhm.
think, ever of all time.
I mean, I literally had the 4
There it is.
agreements cards right here, and I referenced Don Miguel Ruiz in, like, my keynote speech. Like, but I think that's a thing too, right? As an author, we do get kinda hell-bent on, like, am I number 1 in all 5 categories I'm listed in Amazon? Am I number 1 new release? Am I on the Good Morning America? Like, we get all that, but what we remember, the reason we wrote a book isn't for the accolades. The reason we wrote a book is to get this really valuable content, this information that we so passionately believe in. We want to get it out in the world. And you're getting it
Mhm.
out in the world, but sometimes that world doesn't accept it right away. It does take some time for the world to accept that. And eventually it's all out there.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you.
Next
Good
question
question.
for, I'm assuming me.
Yes.
Honey.
Okay, so you mentioned I came and spoke to your class at Cal State Fullerton. You and I have been talking for a while, Amani, about I I I would also like to be speaking more at colleges and reaching the young folk with
Mhm,
the
mhm.
knowledge that I have because I feel like there aren't a lot of people talking to the college set about healthy relationships,
Hmm.
about best practices in dating. What recommendations would you have for a person who is interested in doing more speaking at colleges? Paid speaking at colleges.
I would say there's a couple things we can do. I would say there's a couple organizations that kind of specialize in that kind of avenue and lane, which of course I'll introduce you to and share with you. I
Thank you.
think in addition, just continue to guest speak at different colleges, particularly ones that are close to you, or if you can kind of set it up for when you're on the road. That's a very good way because then they get to know you and they'll bring you back to speak. And maybe then once they have budget, things like that. I think some of the schools that you at least expected, like for example, I know someone who will speak a lot in Nashville at like a lot of the music schools there, but they don't need to pay because they have a lot of people there. But then they'll also go to like Indiana or Missouri where there's not a lot of people there, and they'll be able to speak to them for getting and get paid. So I think it's kind of
Mm.
targeting where you want to go, and just putting it out there, just from the fact that you shared with us here. I know we talked about like national speakers. association and kind of meeting some people through there. I think it's just continuing to talk about it, identify some schools that you want to speak to, and just trying to get an inside connection, and then the doors will open. That's kind of my quick answer right off the cuff. It's hard though, because a lot of schools are cheap, but there's money
Yeah.
there to be had. There's money there to be had.
I did find that out the hard way.
Yes, yes, they do.
It's like it's
There's
like, am
also
I gonna be taking Amtrak there?
No, that's why I'm so grateful that you came down on your own, basically dime. You drove the 40 miles from your location and came and spoke to us, spent all day with us, because that's hard and it's a big ask. So we'll figure out some ways. I have to look at the specific associations that deal with it, but there's some groups where speaking to college students, particularly now, post pandemic, when they're coming back to campus, many students that might have started school during the pandemic or in high school, so they lost a lot of time. Like they don't know how to interact with people. It's really obvious, and so they need help. They need help.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's good. You have your ear to the ground.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I trust when you say that it is needed, that it
Mm.
is that, I'm on the right track with that. Thank you.
Yes, you are, and I'm glad to hear that's still the goal. So we'll definitely help you with that. Um, I have so many other questions. Let me pick one. Can you explain your thoughts on green flags versus red flags and the whole concept you discuss in the book?
Well, okay, red flags have become they're they're everything on social media. It seems like and in even in mainstream media, it seemed like everything I was asked to talk about for the last few years is red flag, red flag, red flag. And I realized I don't really want to talk about red flags anymore. And like people were starting to change the color of the flag. It's like, no, it's like a pink flag, or it's kind of a red flag. It's not really a red flag. Maybe it's a beige flag. It's just a little bit like it's not quite pink. It's not really red. Uh, it was getting out of hand with the colors of flags. And I know I said use colors strategically, but this was not what I meant. And I started to think, what would happen if we focused on green flags instead? Because we can always find a reason to say no. We can always talk ourselves out of something, but what could we look for that would give us reason to lean in? That would give us reason to go, to put our foot on the gas. And so there's still people obviously talking about red flags, but in F the Fairy Tale, I was like, let's focus on the green ones instead because I
Mm.
think there's just so much more discovery in that. And that's what I'm really interested in helping people through. This the whole thing is about really a journey of self-discovery. Yes, it's about moving into a long-term relationship, but moreover, it's about identifying who you are
Mhm.
and what you need. What is the life that you're building? And how do I set myself up on a path to build that with another person? And red flags can't do that. You have to do that based on the green flags.
I like that focusing on the green because you're focusing on the good. There is so much good out there. We do get tripped up on the red flags. I love that. That's good
Thank
stuff.
you. I think it's
What's the
applicable in other areas of our life too.
I
Mhm.
agree. No,
Yeah.
Mandy, what's another question that was sent in to you from our audience?
Okay. Are there different dating sites for different needs, ages, genders, people, that kind of thing? Like what works well for different people?
100% there are different apps, different I everything's kind of an app now. The site's kind of yeah. Um but the challenge is everybody just says like I get people write into dates and mates with questions, and at least once or twice a month I get, what is the best app for me? I am a 49-year-old woman living in Oklahoma, and I'm like, can't answer that for you. And this is as somebody who I've worked with pretty much like all of the major apps in the business. I was a an event leader for Match.com and a media spokesperson. I've been OkCupid's official dating coach. I've collaborated with Bumble. Like I know that each app has a different audience, has a different way that it functions. And still, I cannot tell you which app is going to work best for you. You really kind of have to get in there with the technology and get your hands dirty and see which one or ones work best for you. So I tell people to look for two things when they're evaluating a dating app. First, which one has the pool of people that you actually like and want to date? Um, just are you attracted to the people there? Are you are you interested in the pool? And then the second thing is, do I like the functionality? Or do I every time I get on the app, I'm either overwhelmed or I'm frustrated or I'm just like, "Oh,
Mhm.
can't believe I have to open this dating app again." Because that's not the app for you. So I want you to be able to come to the app with green flags, possibility, and hope, um, and that you'll see people that you actually want to meet. And in the book, I break down all of there's 4 different kinds of dating apps that also work differently depending on who you are, how much time you have to search, how your brain works, and it's really part of the strategy to find the best dating app match. But that said, you probably can't set it and forget it. You can't just be like, "Oh, well, Bumble worked for me this one time, so it's always gonna be Bumble," because it changes over time too. The pool
Mhm.
changes, so you might have to revise it, and you definitely should be updating your profile regularly on all of the apps that you're on.
Oh, now just to
Love
kind of
that.
piggyback that
Good.
question, can you explain to people who might not know the term like app cycling, cycling through the apps and kind of doing that?
Here's what I love about Amani. Amani really does the work. He really did the research here.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
yes, I also work on the Drew Barrymore show as, the official love expert there in the Drew crew, and on the show, I debuted this concept called cycling in 2021, I think,
Mhm.
because I was seeing that a lot of my clients were getting burned out on one particular app, and they would and this has been the pattern for a long time, where as soon as you sign on the app, you get all of the fresh people, you get pushed as the new person to everybody, so you get a bunch of matches right out of the gate. And then around, like, the 3rd week, it starts to peter off, and you start to wonder, like, am I not cute anymore? What has happened? Am I is this working? Is this thing on? And then a lot of people will just sign off then and just be like, "Well, I guess it's not working." What I encourage people to do now is when you get to that lull point, either stay on, first of all. You could just stay on and accept that the volume is not as high, but you're still going to, when new people sign on, get the connection with the people that are right for you. Or you can do what I call cycling, where you then go to your second app. And I like to have a mix. So I said there were different kinds of dating apps. There's the legacy apps that have a huge pool, have been around a long time, have a lot of legacy features. They take a lot of time to set up a profile, to sort, um, but they have critical mass. Then there's the swipe apps. A lot of people, a lot of variety of intent, though. Then there are the niche apps, smaller pool, but targeted for a particular interest or value, belief system, something like that. Um, and then you have the curated, where they like eHarmony you mentioned a minute ago, Mandy. That's they select the matches for you. You don't get a ton of matches, but the app is sort of doing some of the work to do the sorting for you. So you might want to cycle through a couple of these categories of apps. So maybe you do the swipe app for a while, for 3 to 4 weeks, and then you hit that lull, and then you're like, let me do the curated for 4 weeks. And then the cycling part happens when you hit that lull point on the curated app, then maybe you go back to the swipe app.
Mm.
And suddenly then you have new activity, you update your profile, your primary photo. Hot tip, check. Update your primary photo, and then you're new on the app again. And so that to for me, that creates a little bit of momentum. You have to sort of generate your own momentum on the dating apps, and I found that that helps my clients stay a little bit more invested in the process because what I'm trying to get people to do is play the long game. Now, that said, most of my clients within 3 to 6 months do meet somebody
Okay.
within 3 to 6 months of doing my program, but but I want to condition people for playing the long game and not have the expectation. Sure, plenty of my clients have met someone on the first or second date. I don't want people going into it with that hope or expectation because then that leads you to disappointment.
Mhm.
Mm. Okay. So I got two final questions. My first one for you is, you've done a lot of work. You've partnered with a lot of brands. You've worked on a lot of different TV networks with a lot of different TV professionals. You've written a book. You're now going to be the keynote speaker at Podcast Movement. Your career has come a long way, and you've pretty much relaunched your own career when you left TV and then went to do this full time. What have been maybe three tips that you would give people for success that you've experienced, that you've seen during, and I don't want to say your reinvention because that might diminish a little bit, but just how you've recreated yourself after leaving television?
It's funny. It's funny because I actually so I was the executive on Ghost Hunters, which was my favorite show at the time when I got the job. I was like, "Oh my god." Dream show to be the executive, the creative executive on, and shape the show. And I just went to a book signing for one of our hosts, and he was like, "So are you just doing the dating thing since you left television?" I'm like, "I never left television. I'm on television every week. I am in a different capacity,
Mhm.
but I'm still doing a lot of the stuff that I was doing before. I'm just doing it for me and my personal brand,
Yeah.
rather than telling him what to say on television." So, but I very much resonate with the idea of reinvention. And that is actually a big takeaway for me is that you always have an opportunity to rewrite and reinvent. And I really feel like I'm like mid-career. Like there may be another 2
Yeah.
turns ahead of me and I don't know what they are yet. Like right now I'm enjoying what I'm doing. Um and I'm so fueled by the work that I don't need to think about, okay, well, what's the next? I know a lot of people in business will say that they do their 5-year plan and their 10-year plan. I don't do that. And maybe I did before, but then I realized that you can't predict. Like if
Mhm.
10 years ago, if you had asked me if I would be sitting here having this conversation with you and looking at the resume that you just read, like there's just no way I could have predicted it. So instead I just think, what do I want to do next?
Mm.
And you can use this even within the current career that you're in. It doesn't mean like what what do I want to completely reinvent to next? It's just what do I want to do next? And that has always guided my career. So that's one. The second thing is don't let people tell you you can't. All
Mm.
my whole career, people have been like, "No, you can't. You can't start out at a network in an executive assistant job at a network. You have to. This is how we do it. You have to start at an agency, or you have to, begin it at this stage, and you build from there. And that's how everyone does it." And I'm like, "Okay."
Watch.
I always say I always
Yeah.
say, like, "Okay, watch me." And
Yeah,
then
good
I get
feedback. Yeah.
my first official job, my first paid job in television was as an executive assistant at CBS at the network when I was 21 years old. I got
Amen.
that job. I
Mhm.
beat out like 50 people for that job because you know what? It was just my job. I was the
Mhm.
right person at the right time, at the right place, with the right experience, with the right attitude, and it was my door to walk through. And that's what I have done my whole career is I just draw a new door. I just create a
Yeah.
new door.
Mhm.
People told me, "You can't pivot from being in casting to being in development and programming." Okay, watch me. You can't pivot from being an executive to being a content creator and a dating coach. Okay, watch me. So, I would love for everyone to feel uh that sort of ambition, that sort of power over their own destiny,
Mhm.
because that's been a big takeaway for me. And then the other thing is relationships. So
Mm.
you mentioned that I drove down to
Yeah.
Fullerton
Yeah.
and gave of my time. But really, um, what I was doing was building a relationship. Like, we had a relationship from the collaborations we had done, and I wanted to support you in
Mm.
this new endeavor for you and build more relationships. Who knows? The students that saw that were in that class, maybe that is somebody that's going to hire me to host my own show down the road.
Mhm.
We don't know. We don't know. And it's funny, somebody once told me the people that you see that you see on the way up are the same
Yeah.
ones you're gonna see on the way down, right? So you gotta
Mhm.
right. And it happened to me in my career where there were executives, not gonna name any names, but there were people that were not so nice to me when I was an assistant that walked in the door to pitch me shows later, and I'm like, "Oh, so nice to see you." And there are
Again.
also again, and I and I'm not a person that holds a grudge too, but I do maintain my relationships, and so many of the opportunities that I've had later in my career have been seeded through relationships that I built, not with the chair that somebody was sitting in, but with the human, with the person, and that continues to pay dividends throughout my career.
Amen.
I feel like Damona, everything that you're talking about today, you're pulling from all these little the ruckus I just made is look at this quote that is on my calendar. The greatest pleasure in life is doing what people say you cannot do. This
Ah,
is this is March. This
Yeah. Oh,
I just flipped this morning.
man.
And you just said that, and it's like fuel, right? It's like, sure, tell Damona she can't do it. You're just gas and fueling her to do something more. And
I
so,
eat nose for
yeah,
breakfast.
yeah, exactly. So sorry for the ruckus, but between your referencing
I
of
love it.
Don Miguel Ruiz, love letters of great, like these are things I wasn't even planning on talking about, and it's like you're big brothering my office right now. It's wonderful,
I
wonderful.
also
Yeah.
do use intuition a lot. So,
Oh,
maybe I didn't know, and I knew, but I didn't know. But, I mean,
oh,
you had all
good.
of that stuff right there,
Oh,
so
Yeah.
so
maybe you're
good.
doing it too.
So
So,
good.
Mandy, I'll let you kind of close us out here. I normally would ask you, you've kind of already answered it though, Damona, like what advice would you give 21-year-old Damona as you were leaving? Was it Northwestern? Northwestern
Mhm.
or Northwestern, yeah. But you've kind of already answered that because you gave 3 good tips there. So maybe you think about that. I'll let Mandy kind of close us out and then we'll let you get back to your day.
Yeah, I just want to know, how can we support you? Obviously buying your book, right?
Please.
The beautiful F
Like,
the fairy tale.
yeah.
But how else can we support you? How else can we lift you up and continue to see you rise, aside from telling you you can't do something, because we know that gives you fuel?
I'm hungry for some no's. Um, no, honestly, buying the book and leaving a review, which as
Ooh,
authors, the reviews are really, really important to the Amazon algorithm. And let's be honest, the Amazon algorithm is really important.
Mhm.
Um, of course, uh, encouraging people to listen to the Dates and Mates podcast, which has been my labor of love for the last 11 years
mhm.
as a podcaster. And I am really stepping into this new lane as a speaker, both college speaker and am doing a lot of corporate speaking and collaborations. So I'm very much interested in finding new ways, new intersections between relationships and brands and businesses and other communities, because I think there's a lot of overlap. As I've said throughout this whole last hour, there's a lot of overlap between what I teach people as a dating and relationship coach and what people encounter in their professional lives, and I just want to be of service.
Yes. Well,
Okay.
go ahead, Mandy, because I'm,
Oh,
I'm
I
sure
love that. I have
we can
ideas
help
off
you. We can help
offline. I've
you.
got
Yeah,
ideas.
we can
Yeah.
help you.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. That's great.
Love
So,
ideas.
yeah, I just want to really commend you on your work ethic, the way you continue to just put the work in day after day. And you do a lot of work. It's not just appearing on the
Thank
Dewberry
you.
Marsh Show. It's not just writing a book, like you're writing for publications, the Washington Post, the New York Times. Like you put in a lot of work. I respect your grind. I love the fact that you are stay consistent. You give honest advice, like the book. There was definitely some things that touched me in the book that I'm going to revisit or whatever.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm just so proud because, after 6 years, you're an author, you've done so many great things. So just keep it up. We're fans, and we'll make sure that our people support you, write reviews, buy the book, all the above. And we're going to find you some really nice speaking opportunities too.
Thank you. I appreciate your support, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak to your audience here today.
Of course. So what we're going to do is we'll put you back in the green room after a round of applause. So thank you again. Round of applause.
Round of applause. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Damona. My cheeks are aching. You made me smile. Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, Mandy, that will do it for our show. Another great show. What and who do we have to look forward to next week?
We have Chris Riccardi, who is Vice President of Strategic Sales for KSL Hotel Groups. And he's got a lot to talk about people and retention and using sales strategies to keep employees happy and using recruitment strategies with your employees to grow sales. So I'm very excited about chatting with him next week.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Everyone, make sure you rate and review and follow the podcast and the live stream. Please share it with a friend. Subscribe on the platform of your preference. And just thanks for tuning in live or listening to the replay. We appreciate the support, and we will see you all next week, 4 p.m. on the East Coast, 1 p.m. on the West. Thanks again to our guest, Damona Hoffman, for answering all my questions and all Mandy's questions. So thank you so much, and we will see you all next week. Bye.
See you next week. Bye.